Hello everybody, it's Al here. Since we originally published this episode, it's come to light that I cocked up the rules, which I'm sure won't be the first time, it won't be the last time it happens. During the episode to come, I went on a little bit of a tirade around the bundles within Stardew that were essentially impossible to complete. What I didn't know is you can spend hearts within the game to swap your bundles out, so there is a mechanism within the game that allows you to get past that. I was quite harsh on elements of the gameplay because of that rules mistake, so for that I'm sorry, and I just wanted to put this at the start of the episode to basically disregard my little rant during the review. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Bye for now. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Board with Each Other, the board gaming podcast that looks at board games through the lens of playing as a couple, or with a good friend, or with the pizza delivery guy you just won't let leave. I'm Al Simpson and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, wife and player 2, Hannah Kelly.
Hi guys.
So today we are going to be talking about Stardew Valley, the board game. Stardew Valley is a reimagining of the hit indie farming simulator, I guess I would say. How would you describe Stardew Valley, the game?
Oh, I think farming simulator is a little bit harsh, isn't it? I'm thinking about Goat Simulator and stuff like that. It's it is a really lovely indie game, huge amount of depth to it. It lasts hours and hours and hours, and is probably one of I've got a very soft spot for Stardew Valley.
Yeah, you plugged a lot of hours into it. It's very much sort of another take on the Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing kind of formula.
I've never played Animal Crossing.
Yeah, we've never had a Nintendo console, that's why.
Yeah. But it's not about board video games.
No,
board games.
No, it's not. But I thought we'd have to mention it because it is the first one of these that we've done that is a reimagining of sort of an existing video game. I know there are quite a few out there. The board game version is a cooperative board game where each player takes on a particular role around farming. So profession, should I say? Which, if memory serves me correctly, are mining, fishing, foraging, and farming. Unsurprisingly. And through those profession players, you basically have to do two things. You have to fulfill a series of random objectives that you draw at the start of the game, which there are 4. And you have to complete a community centre. So for those who haven't played the video game, the community centre is basically a repository for all the things that you grow and obtain during the game. And you hand them in and you get rewards. The board game version has 6 rooms within the community centre. They all require different things. Again, they're randomised, sometimes between a choice of 5 cards or a choice of 3. And you have to deliver those. The requirements vary from room to room. Some of them are money, some of them are crops that you buy, others are things you forage, fish that you fish up, they can be minerals, all sorts basically. Any of the resources that you find in the game are represented again in the board game. So on your turn, you basically get to do 2 actions and 1 move. So you can pick anywhere on the board to start. The board is comprised of basically the town that you live in, and some outskirt areas like different places to fish, the ocean, the lake, etc., and the mines. And you can start anywhere. You can do an action, and then you can either stay where you are and take another action, or you can move along a predetermined path from one area to another and do a second action where you end up. When you move down a path, there's a series of what are called forageables on the board, which are basically face-down card tokens, and you basically choose one of those that borders the path you've taken and pick it up. You have a player card on which you have an inventory, which is very limited. You only ever have space for 6 items. You have a tool associated with your profession that you can upgrade as the game goes along to make you better at whatever it is that you do. And starting at the end of the first season, you start to get basically upgrades, which are almost like level ups for your profession. Game flows where you have something called the season deck, and you have 4 cards per season, and then a 5th end of the season card. The cards you draw, basically you draw one at the start of your turn, and it will cause random events to take place. So that could be anything from a crow eating your crops, to it raining and your crops getting magically watered. Birthdays, so friends you've made will give you gifts. And almost always you have the ability to trade, so you can sell things and trade things between players, which is very important. Because it's the only way you get money, and also it allows you to give things that you have picked up and found to other players who may be able to make more use of them on their turn. There's also special cards, which are festivals, which each have their own unique properties when you draw them. The season deck is not the same every game. There's basically a much wider selection of cards for each of the 4 seasons, and you construct the deck at the start of the game, so there's a large degree of sort of randomness. You don't really know what's gonna come your way during the game, and that's basically it. If you manage to yes, you can also make friends. So
friends are a really important part of the game. So if you make a friend, you get heart tokens, and you use those heart tokens to reveal bundles and also negate some of the negative effects that perhaps come up in game.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. So yeah, making friends is very, very important, just like real life.
It's funny how you forget that part.
Yeah.
Just like real life.
So, I think that's basically how gameplay flows, and in order to win the game, as I said, you have to complete all of your objectives, which could be things like make a certain number of friends per player, have so much money per player.
Number of animals per player.
Yeah, exactly. And complete all of the community centre bundles. I think it's fair to say that unlike the video game version, which is very, very relaxing, Stardew Valley, the board game, is what I would term unrelentingly vicious.
Yeah. The amount of turns you have to do an awful lot is very little, and seasons tick over at an astonishingly fast pace. I think spring is often gone before I've even worked out what it is that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the last thing I wanted to mention is there are a lot of different mechanics in play. Basically, all of the various things you can do, so fishing or exploring the mine, which is a bit like exploring a dungeon, basically. They all operate quite differently. So it's one of those games where it's not exceptionally complex, but there are a lot of rules. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different things you need that are very situational that you need to know how to do depending on where you go. In terms of running time, I think, what would you say?
I'd say an hour, give or take. Maybe up to an hour and a half, maybe 45 minutes the quickest. I guess,
that's with 2.
An hour, give or take. So this was a Christmas present to me from Al, because I love the game so much and I love a video game. I have to say, I think they've done a really good job of representing the kind of heart of what Stardew Valley is about. You get all the same characters and the villagers through there, so there's a real nice strong theme there. Planting and crops, that's there, and I think, yeah, it really reminds me of the game. Also, as I play quite often, I hear the music in the back of my head.
I mean, it is worth mentioning that the game is actually published by, and at least partly designed by, the design of the game, Concerned Ape. So he's published it, and his name is on the credits. How much of the actual game mechanics he was responsible for, I'm not sure. But in comparison to a lot of these sort of licensed IP games, I think he obviously had a much deeper involvement than perhaps some of the other ones we've seen in the past. I think it's also worth mentioning, I mean, I thought that the original sort of price point of this, I think it was like £55 or £60, was quite high. A lot of game shops do damaged games, and something I never actually knew before this cropped up on my radar. And the description of it said, oh, there's some damage to the box, contents will be fine. I was like, okay, and it was literally half price. And it's turned up, and there's a very slight dent in one of the corners. So for those of you out there that are looking for a bargain and didn't know this existed, I mean, obviously I do sell games on what have you now and again, but for the most part I just like adding them to my collection. If that's something that doesn't bother you and you didn't know that was a thing, at least in the UK, I'm not sure about other countries, it's definitely worth a look.
We'll say nothing about you buying me a damaged board game intentionally for Christmas. Let's just skip past
I had a budget. Wasn't our only Christmas present.
And perhaps just before we get to our ratings, it probably is worth mentioning that this is an unrelentingly hard cooperative game. Given how chill the actual video game is, I think we started off, they give you like a modified deck to begin with in terms of a season deck, so that actually you get a flavour of it, and it's not too difficult. And our first few games were quite straightforward, but actually...
we haven't won in a while.
Yes, it's been a long time since we've won. And
it's not been close either.
No, it has been very, very difficult. And I mean, that doesn't bother me.
No.
I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with losing. But for other people, it might be quite a challenge.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, there's elements of this I'll touch on for some of my scores, but there are elements of it that can be unrelentingly brutal, for want of a better term. And we play quite a lot of co-op games.
And for such a happy, friendly sim game, it's like, oh!
It's really quite jarring at times. It's like, why is this so vicious? But yeah, I think it is a very good point, and well done for mentioning it, because if you like your co-op games very, very tough, and you get the replayability from, being able to play them over and over again because you can't beat them, great. But if you're somebody that gets quite frustrated with something, maybe just sort of an advisory sticker there for you. Okay, so I guess on to scoring then. Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, so for those of you who might not have listened to us before, we start off by scoring the general game, and then we go into our couples rating. So our first scoring criteria is components, so the box itself, what it comes with. What I would say is that it's a fairly nice box set. What I love about it is it's got an awful lot of tokens, but it's got a really nice storage system.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I will second that. It's one of the few games I've played where there is a space for everything in the insert. There's no modifications required. You don't have to add anything to it. It all just fits back into the box.
Yeah. And because of that, it makes it really easy to set up and set down, because all these tokens are all nicely organised and ordered, and you just plonk them down on the table in their nice insert, and that's fabulous.
Yeah, and there's a really nice tray for all of the various plant tokens, because there are a lot of different tokens. So you've got bags for some of them where they're supposed to be shuffled, but for the ones that you just want quick access to, they're all just there, so you just pick them off this big tray. Although, saying that, it's a bit of a table hog.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, we definitely have to stretch the table out to be able to play it. You've got quite a large board, and then you've got all these
a lot of
gubbins that go with it. What I'd also say is that you've just got standard player pieces.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm not super happy with either. In terms of your actual player, it's literally just a small plastic chess pawn.
Yeah.
And I feel like they put so much effort into the rest that they could have done something a bit cooler with that.
Yeah.
It just feels a bit, compared to the rest of the components, it just feels a bit cheap and a bit of a cop-out.
Even if it was a bit like a Monopoly playing pieces.
That's my thinking. You could have a little, whatever the tool is, you could have a little plastic version of that. It would just add a little bit of character to the game, whereas that kind of saps it a little bit, with everything else being so nicely done. So, what would you score it?
So 7. I'm quite happy with it. I think the player pieces could do with improvement, but aside from that, yeah.
Yeah, I give it a 7 as well. I think the only things I'll mark it down for is it seems more of a table hog than is necessary for a while. Like, when we play something like Gloomhaven, I don't mind us taking up the entire living room, but it just feels a bit overkill for the level of game it is for some reason. And the player pawn, so yeah, I give it a 7 as well. There you go.
So then our next rating score is complexity.
Mm-hmm.
What do you reckon?
This is a funny one. I don't think it's an overly complex game. I think all of the rules are, they're all, I wouldn't say simple, but they're all fairly understandable. What I find is a bit niggly is the number of different systems in play. Mm-hmm. I find even after, I think we must have played it about 7 or 8 times now, I'm still having to refer to the rulebook quite often, because there's either things that we haven't really used very much, so you forget, and you've got to go back to, now I'm in a situation like cracking open geodes, for instance. Mm-hmm. There's now a system for that. And some of the systems around, like the exploring the mine, for instance, are actually a little bit fiddly.
Yeah, a bit clunky.
A bit clunky and a bit fiddly. And yeah, because of that, it just sometimes it breaks the flow a little bit, having to go back and check. There's not like a one sheet either. I imagine you could download one. I'm sure somebody on Board Game Geek or what have you has created like a bit of a cheat sheet for it just as a reminder. But yeah, it is a little bit clunky in that way. Clunky, not janky. I think everything's fine, but it takes a little bit more referring back.
And I think what I find is that we tend to gravitate to the same certain areas, so there are things that just seem unnecessarily complex. So you mentioned geodes. We don't particularly use that mechanism an awful lot.
No.
So it feels over-engineered for what it is.
Yeah, some of them feel a bit excess to requirements almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of AP,
No.
It's one of those games where you're almost blinded by so many options that you have to go into almost the else space, don't you? You're just like, I'm just going to do this and see what happens. Arguing about rules, I don't think there's.
No, I don't think we do. I think we have to refer back to the rules, but I don't think there's a huge amount of arguing about it. And like I say, I think there's plenty to do on your turns, although your turns are quite restricted. There's plenty there.
Yeah, there's plenty of options. Okay, what did you score it?
So I scored it a 7, mainly because I think it's quite easy for people to pick up, and I don't think it would be particularly complex. But equally, I still feel there's a lot to do and there's a lot of variety. But yeah, absolutely agree that it's a bit clunky in places.
I gave it a 5.
Yeah,
I just think it could be smoother. So that brings us on to shelf life, value for money, and replayability.
So I'm probably going to let you start this off because I think you've probably got stronger feelings on it than me. I mean, I could play Stardew Valley endlessly, be it board game, be it whatever.
Yeah, I do think this has a shelf life.
Yeah,
I think I'm not done with it yet by any stretch of the imagination. We played it a couple of nights ago and I really had fun. But I do think it will stop once you sort of crack it and you've seen everything it has to offer. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge amount to pull me back. I also think in terms of value for money, if I paid full price for this, while components are okay and everything, if I look at other similar priced games, I feel like it's probably a little bit inflated.
Yeah, I would agree that. I mean, is it a limited print run thing? Or?
I have a feeling it might actually be out of print now. I'm not sure whether they're going to print it again. Don't quote me on that. I haven't checked, but I feel like around the time that I did find it for you, the reason I found it a damaged copy was because I couldn't find it in any of the traditional game stores. Or when I say traditional game stores, I was from a traditional game store, but they didn't have any sort of new copies in stock, so I don't know what its status is.
Yeah, and I think whilst, your objective tokens and your community centre objectives will change with each game, the basic mechanics don't really. And so whilst, again, you might choose different professions, you're still kind of facing the same cards over and over again with a similar play style, whereas other games we played, actually they will play completely differently.
Yeah.
Each playthrough. This isn't really the case. It's still the same game, just slightly different challenges, or slightly more challenging or slightly less challenging.
Yeah, I'd second that. And I think the professions don't have the market impact on the game that you think they would.
No, they don't. I remember us really, really, kind of arguing or debating about who's going to take what character. And what profession, but actually these days I don't think it really particularly matters. And I would say also that we tend to play just one player each. You could absolutely take 2, but that just makes the game more challenging in some ways because it's a number of player maps, so you'd have to have 4 times 10 gold per.
Yeah, I was going to get onto that in the scalability section, I think, because I think it's a fair bit to talk about there.
Okay, alright.
Okay, fine. So yeah, I gave it a 5.
So I gave it a 4.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
Although, I will still probably plug hours away at it and make you play it because it's Stardew Valley and I love Stardew Valley.
That's fine. I'll be along for the ride.
And so then our final category under general is fun. And so how much fun you have whilst you're playing it.
I'm about to go on a bit of a rant here, I think.
Strap in, folks. I'm going to pour a glass of wine.
So, if you've listened to some of our other episodes, you'll know that I do love a bit of luck and a bit of random in my games. One of my pet peeves is arbitrary losses in either in competitive or co-op games. What I mean by that is something just happening on a turn that basically makes you lose the game. I mind it a bit less if there's no luck involved and I've just done something really stupid. That's fine. I can swallow that a little bit easier. But when it's just blind luck and something can happen, that means the entire game is a wash. I see that as a design flaw, personally. And what happens with this is some of your community center bundles, they're not revealed from the start of the game, and you have to acquire hearts from making friends in order to reveal them to know what you need. 2 of them can have things that you need that only happen in certain seasons. And that happened a few games ago. We flipped one of the bundles over in summer, and it required spring, which is the season before, crops. There is no mitigation for that. There's no way you can get around that through playing the rest of the game. No amount of money or other resources or anything. That is it. You've lost the game right there and then. So that was literally a 15-minute game that we just, bang, you've lost. And that I am not a fan of.
Yeah. And I think the way we've played subsequently is to kind of take that into consideration. So if we've not revealed those bundles, we'll try and stockpile the things that we think we might need. However, that's just making the game more challenging for yourself in the long run. And, and in spring, which is obviously like the first season that you come to, actually that has a huge impact then on the rest of the game. Yeah,
absolutely. And you end up making tactical decisions to mitigate the possibility of that happening, where in reality, if you knew what you were striving for, you make other tactical decisions.
Yeah.
And it leaves you in a weakened state if it turns out the flip side, as happened in our last game, where we didn't need any of that. And we basically just not wasted our time, but we could have been doing something a bit more helpful. You can also get really screwed over by luck, particularly around the fishing mechanic and the exploring the mines mechanic. They're based on dice rolls. And with the action economy being so precious in this, if you waste a few turns, you may as well pack the game up.
Yeah.
And by wasting a few turns, you could literally have 4 or 5 bad rolls of the dice where you don't get anything that you need, nothing helpful. It's not a kind of game where every time you try you'll get something. You can literally turn up blank and have a wasted action.
Yeah.
And the game can just run away from you very, very quickly because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The mine, I think, can be particularly frustrating because actually if you get a duff mine card, so you have different levels in the mine, but you can also descend a level, and so you get to flip over a new card, and that will tell you what resources you will win if you roll Jujimo and a heart, for example. And actually, if you get stuck on that floor, yeah, that can be really problematic.
Yeah. And it's a great shame, because when it does all work, it's a really fun co-op. The theme or the artwork and everything, you can feel like you're in the game as such, in the video game almost. So it's a great shame that I feel like they just didn't quite nail some of those mechanics. I'm sure people have house ruled it away to a certain extent, but again, I can't think myself of a way of doing it that would then not make the game too easy. So I feel like they took a slight misstep with some of the mechanics and didn't really think through
or perhaps
the
didn't
possibilities.
Play test it.
Yeah.
Perhaps as well as they should have done or could have done.
Yeah, perhaps. But again, if you're the kind of person that doesn't mind that, and you luck's going to screw me over, I'll just reset the game and start again, then that might not be an impediment for you. But it didn't make me angry. It made me. I've left so many great co-op game sessions where I've lost and gone, that was a great game. A lot of the time when I lose in this, or we lose in this, it just leaves me feeling a bit deflated in a way, because I feel like we've lost not really due to the choices and decisions that we made.
And because Stardew Valley, the video game, there is no winning, there is no losing. It is just a game that you play,
Yeah.
And so maybe you don't have that, in the same way.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
That said, I like to restart games an awful lot. It doesn't bother me anywhere near as much as you.
No, I don't.
So, for that reason, I gave it a 6. But I would agree with you that I think, that it's not a different game each time you play it. And so it does have a shelf life, so I gave it a 6.
Yeah, I gave it a 4, which is harsh, I think, but... And it almost speaks to, I hate it. I don't hate it. I really like the game. If they made a couple of different design choices, it would be a 7 or 8 for me. It's just irritating. I think the more I play it, the more they niggle.
Yes, I can see it being one of those ones that you don't want to play anymore. Eventually you're like, let's trade it out. But it was my birthday present. My discounted, damaged birthday present.
Yes, and you're a simp for Stardew, I get it. So,
We'll be playing it till we're 60.
Okay. All right. Shall we go on to our couple ratings then?
No, should we do the final scores?
Oh, yes,
for
of
general?
course. Okay, so if I figure all those up, we end up with 5.6. We always round up, so that gives a general rating of 6.
That seems about fair. About
Yeah, I
reasonable.
think that
I'm
feels
happy
about
with
right. Yeah. Okay, on to our couples rating then.
Alright, so our first category under couples rating is table talk. So that's thinking about how much time you spend interacting, finding out about your player too. Where would you score it? How would you score it?
Well, I'll probably talk about it first before I score it. I think it's really good for this.
Yeah.
I honestly do. I think winning or losing, I mean, a lot of co-ops you could say the same, but I think you generally, it does make you really discuss what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. I think you have to talk things through, you have to strategize together, and there's a lot of celebration and commiseration with what people do, what the other player's doing. So I think it's really good for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I would say that when we're playing, we are probably talking about the game and what we're doing in the game.
We're both really engaged.
Yeah, we're really engaged with it. When you pick your upgrades at the end of the season, or if you get to pick one, quite often we'll have a conversation about what we think is best.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talked about the whole getting to know you factor. Well, actually, I don't know that I've seen you perhaps throw a strop about unfair. I think that whole thing was quite new for me. I didn't realise that you were going to react so badly to this arbitrary loss. I was a bit like, meh.
Just for the listener's sake, by reacting badly, she means grumbling. I didn't, flip the table and start throwing plates.
Well, no one's ever done that while we're playing a board game.
You came pretty close with Scythe.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'm still thinking about divorce. I'm still thinking about it.
Right, so I gave it an 8. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I gave it an 8 as well. Absolutely, completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. So next one, Hannah, would you like to?
Yep, so this is, if it's a competitive game, then competitiveness, or if it's co-op, then a co-op rating. What we also talked about as well is the idea of quarterbacking.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling, this is not how we play it, because
No.
I think we're level pegging in this, but I think that there is a very high propensity for quarterbacking in
Absolutely.
this game.
Potentially the worst I've ever seen.
Yes, actually, I was thinking about this today. I completely would agree with you. I think if you've got somebody who perhaps is a little bit shyer or a bit quieter, who's not familiar with the game, you would completely take over and say, this is what you're going to do, and this is the best course of action, and the other person wouldn't get a look in.
It would turn into a solo game with somebody rolling dice occasionally.
Yeah.
It's great if you're on the same page and you're both approaching it in the same way and you genuinely are cooperative. But yeah, I mean, even you compare it to something like Pandemic, this is worse for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If somebody wanted to take over, it would completely ruin the experience of somebody else. And somebody could very well take over through no fault of their own. I think the game is just built that way.
Mm-hmm. I actually think that even us, and I think we try quite hard not to do that when we have new players and we're introducing them to board games. I think even then it would be very hard not to do.
Yeah, the temptation to do it would be very, very difficult, particularly because it is so punishing.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the X factor that makes it worse. I think rules-wise, if you compare it to something Pandemic or something of that ilk, the propensity is roughly the same, but it is such a punishing game that the temptation is like, oh no, don't do that, you've got to do this.
And action economy is so limited, you cannot waste a turn. I found myself in a situation where I've accidentally wasted a turn because I hadn't thought it through. And I was a bit like,
yeah. And so we're screwed now.
Yeah. And I think that's possibly its biggest downfall. However, that's not how we play, and that's because of who we are.
No, it's not. But I think when we devised this category, it was always about the potential for that and potentially marking it down for that. And for that reason, I'm giving it a 5.
Okay, so I gave it an 8 because that's not how we play it. But I mean, maybe I'll downgrade that a little bit, maybe to like a 6.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, because I just think the capacity and potential for it there is really, really high, and if that is,
it'd be so hard not
if
to.
that is a potential problem for you, then I would steer clear, personally.
I definitely wouldn't be playing this with somebody perhaps who I was newly seeing, husband number 2.
Backup husband, semi-husband, whatever you want to call him. Whatever, don't judge.
But yeah, I think it works because we have a system.
And we've been playing
for a long time, but definitely not for a new person, or I definitely have to bite my tongue.
Fair enough. Okay. So our final category is scalability and FOMO. Would this be better with more players? Do you feel like you're missing out with playing with only 2?
No.
I would agree.
Is it a really, really succinct answer? No, absolutely not. So I kind of touched on this to begin with or earlier on. We play with 2-player mats because actually you largely have decided that it would be easier because your main objectives are...
They scale.
So rather than needing, say, 10 gold per player, so a total of 20 gold, we'd actually need 40, and getting 40 gold is a lot harder. I don't think it really matters either way. I think it would be fine, but I definitely don't see the need for additional players. And I think, given the quarterbacking that we've talked about, I think actually it's better that we picked up the game at the same time and we played it as us.
Yeah, I mean, when Hannah's talking about we play with 2-player mats, what she means by that is the vast majority of co-op games we tend to play two-handed. So Gloomhaven, for instance, we play with 4 characters. We control 2 each. Mm-hmm. Pandemic, we usually play with
1 each and a floater.
1 each and a floater. Oh, no. Don't call them a floater.
A random that we shared play control.
A shared character, or floater, which is now what it will be known as till the end of time. So we usually, if it's a co-op game, although Marvel Champions again was exception to that, but I think Marvel Champions is so complicated with playing two actual hands. Just no, definitely not. But in the classic sort of co-op, you have a character and you play the game. We tend to play with 2, or have a floater. We don't. It's
a legit thing. You talk about floaters in restaurants, I'm sure.
Moving on. It doesn't add anything to this, I don't think.
I think it would detract, actually.
I think it would detract. I mean, we haven't tried it. Cards on the table, we haven't tried it. But I think it would make the game even more difficult because everything scales. All the objectives and community centre bundles scale with the number of players. And because the action economy is so tight and so small, I don't think adding extra people would necessarily make achieving those goals any easier. You just have to get more stuff. So it is the opposite of why we would score it low. So for that instance, I've given it a 9.
Oh, so I've given it a 10.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think adding a third player would make any difference whatsoever.
Plus the downtime. We talked about it taking an hour to an hour and a half. I think if you played a genuine 4-player game with this, it would double the time. The amount of discussion and strategizing. Yeah, you may disagree.
Perhaps. Yeah, I don't know that I particularly disagree with that. I particularly agree with that. Yeah, I think you would still have the same conversations, and I think you'd probably react more to what was happening on the board. So actually, yeah, I think it would obviously run you a longer time, but I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, there we go. Okay, so that gives us a couple's 2-player rating of 7.5, which rounds out as an 8.
That's surprisingly high, and I think still higher than Marvel Champions.
Quite possibly. I mean, I guess I agree. It's a decent to middling game that's really good at 2 players.
Yeah.
I think.
Would I spend £50 on it for a 2-player game? Probably not. And I think the overall game.
I think the overall game needs to be a bit better, but it does play really, really well as 2, which is always the lens that we look at things through.
Yeah.
So if it seems like your bag, and this is your kind of situation, and I assume by listening to the podcast it is, then might be worth purchase.
I think there's probably something that I've been thinking about a lot about Stardew Valley that hasn't kind of come up. What I would also say about it, which is kind of frustrating, is that I find we tread the same paths because you've got only the option to move once and have your 2 actions. The path that you tread is actually really quite narrow, so it's always the same slots that we go to forageables, and that doesn't matter because the forageables are randomised each gameplay and also each season. But again, it just kind of feels like there's so much of the board that we're not really exploring because your action economy is so limited.
Yeah.
You've got to be really beelined and you've got to be really objective.
I'd agree with that. And it almost does feel like you're missing out a little bit as well, because you've got all these mechanics and all these different things that you can do, but you actually once you get to know what's required by a lot of the bundles and what have you, you find you end up doing the same things. I think a lot of our games, I'm just constantly nipping between the mine and making friends, or the lake fishing and making friends. And you're
Geodes is a really good example.
Yeah.
So last game, like, we got a Jojo tile which said that we couldn't crack geodes, or it cost us more to crack geodes, and I was like, well, it doesn't really matter because we haven't got time for that. We've got them water crops.
It almost just feels like extra gubbins on there that you don't really have to use as part of the gameplay.
Which is a shame, because the whole point of Stardew Valley is it was this really immersive experience
sandboxy
where
sandboxy.
It doesn't really matter if it took you 3 years to fill a bundle.
Get some chickens. Yeah. Right. So I guess that is that. So as we said, a middling game that is really good for 2 players if that is your bag. So I think next episode we're going to be talking about Calico. Obviously, we've got all our social media platforms up, so if you want to engage with us on there, that'd be great. Join the conversation. I'd love to hear other people's experiences with the game. Am I just being precious about the randomness, or have people got similar feelings?
And have you ever bought any discounted board games? What steals and what bargains did you get? I'm always up for a good bargain, even if it is for a Christmas present.
Or are we just going to devolve a Facebook group into like Bargain Hunt board game edition? Yeah, I'm okay with that. And obviously, if you want to leave us a review on your podcast medium of choice, that would be greatly appreciated. But until next time, have fun, be good to each other, and play lots of games.